groundbreaking bill proposal prohibiting organized covert torture effected with electronic weapons and organized stalking under review by state legislatures in California. Support needed. With information from Dr. Tomo Shibata and other linked sources. Concerned residents of California are rallying behind a groundbreaking bill proposal on organized torture authored by Dr. Tomo Shibata, author, acclaimed human rights analyst and sociologist holding an interdisciplinary PhD with high distinction from the School of Advanced Studies in Social Science in Paris and France, and currently presented to select legislatures in the California state legislation. Unequivocally, Dr. Shibata, who published extensively against human rights violations in Japanese and American journals, presented at various United Nations Human Rights Commission meetings, and is advisory board member of Freedom for Targeted Individuals, notes, the proposed bill, titled the Organized Torture Act, declares that organized covert torture is a crime against humanity. High numbers of residents reporting targeting with organized stalking and physical torture via invisible radar, microwave weaponry across California. This proposal was made by Dr. Shibata, states, on the basis of complaints to human rights groups from high numbers of residents across California from various cities including San Diego, Berkeley, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Palo Alto, and others of organized covert torture whereby, in lieu of outright abduction, victims are kept under constant control of the covert torture organizations by organized stalking, sustained surreptitious monitoring, cyberstalking, and stealth physical assault and battery with radiation weaponry such as microwave, radar surveillance weapons. Well, isn't this interesting? And here I sit right in the middle of it. Different sources offer varying estimates running into hundreds of thousands of the numbers of organized covert torture victims, often labeled targeted individuals, within the United States of America and around the world. A close estimate is still unclear. The organized stalking, torture, and harassment surveillance is being run. It is observed and or surmised by former FBI Los Angeles chief and special agent in charge Ted Gunderson, former FBI Special Agent Girl Salisbury, former CIA Attorney Raul Manchanda, former CIA scientist Robert Duncan, former high-ranking SIS security officer Brian Cofron, former NSA intelligence analyst Karen Melton Stewart, Dr. Shibata, and some human rights advocates in touch with reporting victims by groups that profit from gross human rights violations, such as fusion center contractors, pro-subjugation security companies, secret societies, Freemasons, KKK, satanic cults, drug cartels, local mafia, criminal elements within law enforcement, intelligence agencies, and the military-industrial complex for purposes of domination, control, community takeover, and human trafficking in clandestine human experimentation projects, including lucrative military, intelligence, and medical university contracts. Dr. Shibata notes that the purpose of the organized torture included discrediting the victim who filed a civil or criminal complaint against a member or an associate of the torture organization, and discrediting a whistleblower or a non-consensual human experimentation subject. Police usually do not acknowledge these crimes and, although not qualified to diagnose anyone, in fact, stigmatize reporting victims as delusional and mentally ill, an illegal diagnosis echoed blindly by ill-informed doctors, psychiatrists, and journalists, uneducated in the areas of cutting-edge, militarized neuroscience technologies and the clandestine and covert techniques of sophisticated, organized crime. Co-opted corporate media additionally portraying reporting victims as delusional as a matter of course, providing collaborative cover for the organized criminal perpetrators of these crimes. Police have refused to enforce penal code on battery and torture effected with electronic weapons. The problem is widespread, but police have refused to enforce the penal code to protect the ruination and sabotage of lives caused by the deadly psychological and physical battery and torture with electronic weapons which accompany the stalking and surveillance of pro-subjected groups, says Dr. Shibata. Electronic control weapons is the term used in law enforcement to indicate electrical weapons or conducted energy devices from which an electrical current, pulse, or beam, wave, or sound wave may be directed to incapacitate, temporarily injure, torture, or kill. Electronic warfare weapons, as per U.S. military documents, are a military designation of spectrum, neural, or acoustic weapons using EMF radiation and sonic technologies and include classified DOJ anti-personnel and dual-use applications, intending basically to attack and disable humans, as opposed to disabling electronic devices, computers, and infrastructures. There are laws currently on the books in Massachusetts and Michigan preventing the use of electronic weapons by civilians, but such laws are not enforced to prevent the use of such weapons on the bodies of humans by such contraries as law enforcement, intelligence agencies, or branches of the military and Air Force, or federal agencies such as the NGA, National Geospatial Agency, or NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, who use imaging and tracking radar from satellites. Space-based weapons under scrutiny. Concern is increasing nationally, however, and within the state of California, to legally stop these crimes. Notably, in one city in California, Richmond City, passed a resolution in 2015 supporting the tenets of the Federal Space Preservation Act proposed by Senator Dennis Kunichi, prohibiting the use of electronic and space-based weapons on civilians after a group of citizens made presentations reporting harm to the City Council. Space-based weapons are no longer a far-fetched possibility deriving purely from science fiction. Director of the Technology at Targeting Justice, Richard Lighthouse, a scientist, researcher, and former NASA engineer, has recently stated that a patented microwave pulse weapon system, BracTor, is being used from satellites to target and assault civilians. Well, imagine that. John Fleming, a researcher and writer, has noted that highly sophisticated magnetocephalograph audio and imaging systems dating back to the 80s mounted on satellites can potentially read human minds, conversations, and actions from space. Paul Baird, Australian researcher and human rights advocate, reports from interviews with offices in government and intelligence in the 90s that sophisticated monitoring and weapon systems on satellites are indeed being used for tracking, monitoring, and invasive neuro and electronic modification by powerful supra-governmental criminal networks. John St. Clair Okoye, in his 1992 lawsuit against the NSA, reveals a great deal about the invasive brain monitoring of human beings being conducted by NSA signals intelligent from space. Journalist Susie Dawson, working with the NSA CIA whistleblower Edward Snowden's documents, has revealed that the NSA has contracts with governments globally to use their satellite hardware, plausibly for both selective and mass global surveillance. Despite obfuscating coverage by major corporate media, all of this points to the absolute possibility of satellite use for remote irradiation and tracking of humans. Maybe this is why President Trump says it's imperative that we have the new Space Force. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I'm really on the fence. I am a targeted individual. So on one hand, it's twofold. But leave your comments in the below. Congressional awareness of the organized electronic weapons, torture, harassment, non-consensual, covert implantation, experimentation. At the national level, a few congressmen have acknowledged the existence of organized torture and stalking programs. Senator John Glenn has spoken out against the non-consensual chipping of citizens for experimental and tracking purposes during the introduction of the Human Research Subject Project Act of 1997. Excerpt below. Mr. Glenn, Madam President, if I approached any senator here and I said, "You did not know it, but the last time you went to the doctor or went to the hospital, your wife or your husband or your daughter or your son became the subject of a medical experiment that they were not even told about. They were given medicine, they were given pills, they were given radiation, they were given something, and were not even told about this. Were not even informed about it. Yet they were under some experimental research that might possibly do them harm. Maybe some good will come out of it, but maybe it will do them harm also. But they do not know about it. People would laugh at that and say that is ridiculous. That cannot possibly happen in this country. Yet the very situation is what this piece of legislation is supposed to address." Representative Jim Guest wrote in 2007 to members of the legislature asking for congressional support of those being affected by electronic weapons, torture, and covert harassment groups, and reveals and affirms that verichips and RFIDs have been and are being tested on Americans non-consensually in a mass movement and used for tracking purposes. Senator Dennis Kucinich, Ohio, put forward the bill authorized by Alfred Lambermont Weber and Carol Rosen for the Space Preservation Act of 2001 to prohibit the kind of tracking, stalking, and EMF weapon assault that Dr. Shabita's bill proposal also seeks to expressly prohibit. Unfortunately, this Space Weapons Act will not be passed. Well, I'm running short of time here. There's a lot more to read. I would suggest that you guys go and read this article for yourselves in its entirety and see what it is that you can do to get involved. It's going to take all of us to stop this madness. Thank you for tuning in to my third report today. This is Pam Jones. Be blessed.